So now at this point, we want to look at what is happening on, the investor sentiment. And it's interesting because bullish sentiment jumped to 46.4% in the week ending July 5th, highest since November 21. Bearish sentiment continued to retreat. And that's, again, when we talked about that frothiness, that movement, here it is, plain and simple. And then when you look at the allocation survey, June stock allocation rose to 66%, a 13-month high. Bond allocation fell below its 15.9% historical average. So again, people were feeling better about the situation, and you started to see some of this run up. But it's interesting to see that frothiness that we've talked about and those money flows, even in the backdrop of some of the problems that we continue to see under some of the underlying issues that we've talked about and pressure points that continue to rise up. Now, it's interesting. Something just came across that said Nigeria declares state of emergency on food security. And unfortunately, one of the things that we've been talking about so much is they're not going to be the only ones. And they may be the first, but it's going to be a bigger problem. And that's why when you start looking at some of these fears and issues, it's going to be important to look at what are some of the things that are going to happen, even though we have a lot of this bullishness into the equity markets. Wholesale inventory sales ratio has held steady over the past couple months after surging throughout 2022. So again, that ratio is there with the total percent drawdown on U.S. car index now larger than the decline during the great financial crisis. But again, it's all relative because it's like, sure, it's dropped, but going back to 1997, the used vehicle car prices are still insane. And that's something that's going to take time, which is what we are starting to see now with that pivot, with inventories going up and some of this kind of things making up. Retail inventories were expected to be at 0.2. They came in at 0.8, again, supporting what we've talked about. And then when you look at those retail inventories and then, again, back out inflation, we're above where we were on a pre-COVID level. So again, the destocking is over. This is not something that's continuing. And this is what we've been talking about when you start looking at that retail inventory side. And remember, for those that have been following us on the EIA show, freight waves, sonar, like their sonar system, like when you look at all of these indicators, I mean, we haven't been seeing a whole lot of product move throughout the world. So there's less product moving, but yet inventories are increasing. So again, this is relating back to what we've talked about with that slowdown in sales. Ahead of the CPI, so when we looked at some of the CPI data, ISM prices paid for manufacturing and services have both resumed their downtrends, suggesting some of it. But look at the consumer side, the service side is still high versus historics. Again, manufacturing was continuing to slow. And then the gap between June ISM services and ISM manufacturing is nearly 8 points. And that's where we need to watch the consumer because we need to see that service side really start to roll. Import rates of change rate of change over the past 12 months still hovering near the worst in the past decade. And again, tying back to what we've talked about when we look at, again, that slowdown in imports, that pressure coming through, that's where we continue to see some of these different pieces. And then the U.S. retail trade, the Red Book Index, as you can see here, again, pulling negative. And so the retail sales, so you're seeing imports coming down. We've been talking about the slowdown in intermodal from trucking, from rail, and it's now showing up in all of the data points, which typically, famous last words, really kind of shows you where the retail consumer is sitting. Chicago PMI coming in at 41.5, again, steep contraction, showing those pieces. The PC deflator core services, less housing, is still sitting at 4.5%. So again, you're seeing slowdowns in a lot of these manufacturing areas, but that core services is that bridge that keeps holding us up. Now, when we turn to consumer credit, came in much lower than anticipated at $7.2 billion versus $20.3 in April. A drop in non-revolving credit, auto loans was one of the key factors. Overall reading was lowest since late 2020. But again, it takes time for that rollover to catch up. Total consumer credit expanded in May by 7.2. So again, when you start layering all these things in together, when you look at interest rates, when you look at pressure points, when you look at savings getting drawn down, that's where you see that slow piece, which is showing that increase in inventory, decline in underlying sales. Measures of excess savings. When you look at the excess savings rate based on the Feb 2020 savings rate, that's where you can see that we're essentially, because this is only going until about March, now we're in July, and you look at the rate of change. I mean, this is a healthy rate of change when you look at that acceleration to the downside, and why we think that most people have essentially tapped out of that activity rate, which is why we're starting to see those retail sales really hit. May wholesale trade sales came in at negative 0.2 versus the estimate of positive 0.3. Wholesale inventories came in flat versus the estimate of negative 1. So trade sales are negative. Wholesale inventories are flat. Again, none of these are pointing to any type of benefits when you start looking at some of these underlying flows. Now, when you look at excess savings could be gone by the end of the year. This is, again, looking at September 2023 when you look at that level of savings, the level of income, but the savings rate and the U.S. excess. And because of that inflation, because month over month, people are spending more, you're seeing that drawdown. So, and I think September, and that's why we're starting to see articles where they're saying back to school could be the weakest in a decade. All of that is really driven based on people are tightening their belts, and that excess savings is a big component. Household checkable deposit year over year is showing a similar setup to the financial crisis back then. It ended up in a recession. When you see, again, that drawdown and that inability to convert that money from checking to savings, and you're seeing that increased pressure point. Then when we look at the wholesale trade, when you start looking at those different pieces, but then looking at the revolving consumer credit and real revolving consumer credit. So again, when you back out some of the inflationary side, we're just now getting back to where we were on that credit crunch. And so it's tough because you could say, well, the credit crunch is, it's better to look at the nominal to keep things consistent. But even on the real side, we're seeing those pain points coming back. And why? And again, all of this is all culminating at the same time and really creating some of those pressure points. Now, when we look at the tale of two labor forces, the prime age has been soaring while the 55 and over has been falling and is nowhere near its pre-COVID. As you get that pivot where people have retired, they're not coming back. Job openings have slowed, but I mean, going back to 2002, they're still massive. So yes, it's like it has come down, but you're still at a very elevated level. And as more people have retired, you're going to have to see more of those individuals coming in to fill that gap, which is why when you start looking at the constrained supply, excess retirements are still elevated and foreign-born prime age workers are still well below trend. So you get this gap in terms of some of these different pieces, which is why when you start look at, but then when you look at real personal spending, you're seeing that slowdown. So if you're seeing a slowdown in spending, you're seeing a slowdown in activity, you're seeing a slowdown really on a corporate side, well, it's like, it's already expensive for me to hire people. I'm going to try to do more with less. And some of this excess or constrained supply is going to remain in the system for an extended period, especially when you start looking at non-farm payrolls. We're expected at 230, came in at 209. U.S. private expected at 200, came in at 149. So it's slowing, but people are still getting added. U.S. hiring is becoming increasingly concentrated, though. And this is where it's interesting to hone in and kind of pick apart the numbers. It was still good, but it's not everywhere. And that's where you're starting to get some of these pieces. Microsoft, I think, just announced another 10,000 layoff. And it's not something where it's uniform. It's still going to be some of these pressure points. Small business compensation index has rolled over, still elevated versus 2005. So leading back towards that kind of stagnation and less about that deflation side. In June, job leavers as a percentage of unemployed rose to 13.2%, which is not something the Fed wants to see because, again, typically you're leaving for higher wages. You're going to have that pressure on the wage price spiral, and there's just more competition, especially when you look at the labor force participation rate between 25 and 54-year-olds. Prime age labor force participation rate rose to 83.5% in June, up from 83.4% last month. So again, you're starting to see that tap out, and that's what's helping keep those wages elevated. June labor force participation rate unchanged at 62.6%. And this is just, again, putting everything together. According to the Challenger June job cut announcements in the tech center, they dropped to 4.7 thousand from 22.9. But that's actually going to reverse up because that's for June, and the most recent commentary is for July. So again, we will see some of those increases in general. Now shifting over to the housing market. So it's no surprise to see that the MBA U.S. Purchase Index, so looking at mortgages, is the lowest it's been in a very long time, especially when we look at that 2023 in general. It's very much on the low end. So when you look at that piece, it's been an underlying problem. We don't see that getting any better, especially with rates where they are. And then on the median side for 2022, and now 2023, the purchase continues to look at that rate lock side and the rate lock count. Now, when we look at the distribution of outstanding first lien mortgage by rate, you can see the big increase in the 3% and the drop down in 6%. So again, you still have people that are going to be kind of stuck where, why am I going to sell? Which is why if that inventory is down, because it's like, well, if I refinance at 3%, and right now the loans, the mortgage out there is over 7%, well, there's no point in trying to do that. Monthly mortgage payment using median existing home price, U.S. with a 20% down payment and average 30-year mortgage rate continued to go up. As you see that pressure, which is coming full circle back to what we talked about in the last segment, talking about how wages have stayed flat as those home prices have gone parabolic. June average hourly earnings 4.4% year on year versus the estimate of 4.2. That's a positive, but again, that's not exactly what the Fed wants. They'll never say it, but they realistically want that to come down so that people will spend less, or at least get stretched to the point where they rationalize why they shouldn't spend as much. On a month-over-month basis, average hourly earnings came in at 0.4 versus estimate of 0.3, so still maintaining some of that positive. But then when you layer in inflation, you get an idea of, this is nominal, so that's when you start coming into the pressure in terms of, inflationary pressure points that continue to reside. Excuse me, ISM Manufacturing PMI expected at 47.1, came in at 46. And this is just coming back into holistically, manufacturing new orders came in at 45.6, the leading indicators. So you're getting an idea, again, on the manufacturing, the industrial, the real estate, the mortgage. There's a lot of pressure on this side of the equation when we're looking at some of these underlying issues in the U.S. economy. Employment came in at 48.1, inventory levels at 44, but yet inventory levels are down, but yet sales to inventory ratios are up because, again, sales are the ones that are being hit. Prices paid expected at 44, came in at 41.8. That's a positive when you think about inflation, but again, when it's the service side that's really keeping us bid up there. CapEx intentions have rolled over. Real core capital good orders have rolled over as well. So again, that's going to compress people hiring, people doing more out there. Construction spending expected at 0.6, came in at 0.9 in May. Residential buildings saw a nice little increase. And remember, what we've talked about, rents have gotten better. People are looking to pivot and saying, well, am I going to build a single family home or am I going to build a residential building? And that's where we're seeing a bit more of that coming to market. Now, looking at the small business once more, because it all culminates together as small business is the main driver of jobs and everything else. As of June, inflation and quality of labor tied for the single most important problems, which is not surprising given the issue with labor and inflation. Again, they're also pretty interconnected in terms of one leading the other. If you have to pay for better people, that's going to drive up your cost, which you're going to try to pass through, which then comes through as inflation. Optimism rose to 91 versus the estimate of 89.9. Still in negative territory, but again, the outlook rose to negative 40. So you're still getting some benefit, but again, one of the things that we said is it's going to come down and really bounce sideways without any meaningful improvement over the next few months. Actual sales change came in at negative 10. Sales expectations came in at negative 14. So again, all of this showing more slowdown across the board. Small business price plans actually went up, and one of the biggest reasons why they said is because raising prices to ensure margins. So they haven't seen a decline in sales, so let's try to protect margins, so we're going to increase prices. And because small businesses are so important to the underlying U.S. economy, this is inherently inflationary when you think about that kind of bridge keeping us higher. MBA purchase index came in at negative 4.6% versus the estimate of positive 2.8. First drop since June 2nd. MBA mortgage applications came in at negative 4.4%, all of which, again, leading indicators for where we think, where housing is really going in terms of some of the shorter periods of time. 20-city composite for Case-Shiller was expected to be at negative 2.4%, came in at negative 1.7%. And then when you look at the national home price, came in at negative 2, so negative 0.2. So again, not huge drops, which is what the Fed really needs to see as a meaningful drop. Now, it's going to be interesting because this Airbnb kind of shows some of these pivots. So Airbnb revenue collapse, the top 10 cities, you've seen some revenue coming down. Just because of, people don't want it as much, you're not getting as many opportunities. Airbnb inventory versus homes for sale, rentals are the biggest piece. So when you look at the conversion from rentals, so people were going out there buying up homes, and now that they've done a lot of this with leverage, do you start to see some of these rentals that they can no longer rent at a rate that they may be able to cover their mortgage with? Do you then turn around and put that to sale? So could we see inventory spike without any new building? And it's possible. Like, I'm not by no means saying that 955,000 homes are going to go for sale, but could you see 200,000 of them? Sure. Like, maybe that we kind of get back to this 2020 level of 740,000 homes. That's that are rentals. So you'll get 220 that are coming into the sales market, which is going to be an interesting one to see in general. So then when here's a good quote though. U.S. housing market is just how many Airbnbs there are. Data from all the rooms shows 1 million Airbnb VRBO rentals compared to only 570,000 homes for sale, which creates huge home price downside if the struggling Airbnb owners elect to sell, which is going to be an interesting one as we talked about. Mortgage servicing cost counter. It's just, you can see that it's the least affordable it's been going back to the 70s. U.S. 30-year mortgage at a new 10-year high, coming at 7.38% based on the median home price and adjusted for CPI. Again, massive pain in general. And then this is just looking at how the cost, the Case-Shiller, when you look at home price index month on month, was expected to be at 0.4, came in at 0.9. U.S. house home prices index for the FHFA expected at 0.5, came in at 0.7. Again, this is that sticky inflation where it was coming down, and now you're seeing some of this movement back up, which is a problem when you think about trying to clear some of the glut out there. And so U.S. existing home sales started to climb a bit. It's above 2020, but still at a 10-year low. Existing home inventory, though, staying that flat side, which is why you're seeing some of this disconnect. So if people aren't making money in Airbnbs, well, does it make sense just to dump it at, given where they are and try to get the last hurrah, if you will, of some of this market? U.S. rental vacancies approaching the highest in 5 years. U.S. rental vacancy rate reached a low of 4.1% in October 2021 and has been on the rise since. And again, now hovering near 7.1%. And as the fixed mortgage rate continues to go up, people are going to have to rent. This vacancy can bring down some rents depending on the location, and that can help people again in general. But still, a lot of keeping that stickiness on the owner's equivalent rent. and why we think there's pressure as the consumer continues to struggle. So that's what we have for you in the US. In the next segment, we're going to go deeper into Europe and some of the things that have happened on the European front.